Are you feeling stuck in your career or life in general? In today's episode of the Stay at Home Nurse podcast, I'm talking with Ann Konkoly, midwife, coach, and speaker. Ann's mission is to support women and nurses in getting unstuck, reconnecting to who they are, and cultivating what they want. Welcome to the Stay at Home Nurse podcast. I'm your host, Deanna Cooper Gillingham. For over 25 years, I've strived to use my nurse credentials to find work that fit my lifestyle. Whether it was raising my 4 children and 3 fur babies, traveling the world, or moving to Mexico and living on the Caribbean Sea. Sometimes I succeeded and sometimes I failed, but I always learned from the experience. Now, I want to help you by sharing what worked and what didn't work. There are so many opportunities out there for nurses today. The Stay at Home Nurse podcast will inspire and equip you to have a nursing career that is meaningful and supports your lifestyle. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Stay at Home Nurse podcast. Today we have a special guest for you, Ann Konkoly. Ann, would you go ahead and introduce yourself? Let everybody know who you are.
Yeah, I'm Ann. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me today. So my name's Ann Konkoly. I'm the owner and founder of Authentic Coaching, and I coach women and advanced practice nurses on who are usually looking to quit something and cultivate something new, and really, do an upgrade or kind of create that 2.0 version. And so I run a virtual coaching business and I love it. What makes me a little bit different is I've got 15 years of healthcare experience. I started as a labor and delivery nurse and then became a certified nurse-midwife and a medical director. And so I served in a clinical role until mid-2019 when I left to pursue opening this business. So this is work I love to do. So
Awesome. So you kind of climbed the ladder, the career ladder there pretty well, didn't you?
yeah, I started off, yes, it's funny. I think it's a little bit of climbing and it's a little bit of exploring and it's a little bit of trying on, different shoes, so to speak, to see what fits and what works. And I found for me, my nature is something that I love to do projects. I like to sink my teeth into things. I love to, create ideas and think about concepts and really dream big, like big. And so I found that, when I can do that, I'm in my happy zone and place. And then when it gets more into the operational nitty gritties of things and things get more routine, and that's when I start to feel like I'm ready to move on and to get back into that, space of creation and of creativity and innovation. And so I've done that many times in my career, right? Like it started off, felt like I was at a good spot as a nurse, went into midwifery school, got into clinical practice, then became assistant medical director, went into medical, it's always been that. There's been that cycle, so to speak, for me in terms of change and just evolution. And I love that part of it. So
I love that. If you look at my bio, you'll see I've done a little bit of everything. And I feel like it was the same thing, just exploring. You try something, and once I felt comfortable with it, I'd stay there for a very short period of time. And then I wanted to learn something new and explore something different. And I remember being in nursing school, and every rotation I would have, I'd be like, I love this, except for peds. I wasn't into peds and I wasn't into psych, but everything else I loved. And when I look back on my career, I did all of that and more, and I have no regrets. So it sounds like the people you serve are probably not your new grad nurses. Is that correct?
sometimes I do. I do some. I have a program called the APRN Academy and the Midwife Mentorship Club, and I do more mentorship for newer or newbie midwives and NPs, and I love that because there's a certain skill set I think that we don't often come out of NP school or midwifery school equipped to do, which is to understand the business side of medicine and healthcare and how really we can win in essence for our own financial, for our own mental health, for our own financial stability, how we can win in a system that's not really designed for us. And so, so I do a portion of that, and then also do, a coaching, virtual coaching, and the coaching work tends to be, with mentorship, we talk a lot about RVUs and, billing and having challenging conversations and direct communication and, managing those stressful outcomes. And then with coaching, the work that I love and the aspect of coaching that I love is that it is a lot about that visioning process, which, looking back on my career, I can say like, oh, no wonder I love coaching, right? It is me sitting with a fellow nurse or another woman and saying, what do you want? What does it look like? If you dream big, if you wipe the slate clean, what do you want, over the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? And I love that process. So some of it is geared toward, the newer, grads. I also have an arm of my business where I create CVs for advanced practice nurses to help them, again, create a tool for them to stand out. And the bulk of my work though is as a coach, and that's the work that I love to do, because that's, again, like my sweet spot of just dreaming so big. I love it.
And I love that you were able to figure that out. I think so many times I've seen nurses or women or anybody in general that wants to go into business and they don't know what they want to do. They don't know who they are. So it sounds to me like you like to help them figure out who they are and what they want, and not just, I want to start, a whatever business because I heard that I can make some money doing that. But then they find that they're miserable and they just bought themselves another job.
Yes, that's so true. And interestingly, it's one of the I have a handful of people who come to me looking for support with opening a private practice, and especially going through the pandemic and seeing, many so many healthcare jobs being lost and so many nurses being affected, and starting and seeing some of the waves of change with full practice authority and losing that requirement of having to have collaboration in place with a physician in order to do work. And all of a sudden, this beautiful opportunity for entrepreneurship, and saying, well, why don't I just start my own practice? And interestingly, I have some clients who come to me and say, can you help me start a practice? And that is not what I do, right? Like I don't sit in that space of saying, okay, here's how you do the practice and take step one. And that's my goal, is to say, okay, just like you said, like, what strengths do you bring to the table? What is innately valuable about the way that you show up in the world? What sandbox do you like to play in, so to speak? Are you a strategist? Are you somebody who is phenomenal at project management? Are you a strengths? Is your strength, show up in relationship building? And so I love to pick apart and understand that, because I find for my clients and from, on a personal note, for me, that's been one of the biggest tools that I've been able to, accelerate my personal and professional growth and development, was when I started to understand why, how I show up and why it's unique and there's value in it. So we do a two-step process. I do a two-step process with clients. And the first part of it is, who are you? Reconnecting to that inner, very authentic self, right? Shedding some of the layers of all the things that you've gotten super good at, again, whatever positions you've been in and skills that you've honed. And then that second phase is when you have that better understanding of who you are. It becomes so much easier, I think, to then gain that clarity that so many of us seek on, well, what do I do next? The most common thing people say to me is, I don't know what I want, but this isn't it. And I feel really stuck. And so I just work them through a process on, okay, well, let's look at that, and again, that part is, who are you? What makes you unique? What makes you incredibly, like, unbelievable? And what do you want? Like, what do you want in the next few years? What kind of life do you want to create for yourself? And so whether that's staying at home and, like building up a business of, being a case manager, or if it is something like, building a coaching practice, or if it is, I mean, the sky is the limit, as you know. Like, in entrepreneurship, we have, right, the opportunity to create just about anything. Now, there has to be a market for it, and we dabble in all sorts of different things to build a business, and it's a huge opportunity for us. So we go through that whole process, and again, I love it, because it's just, to me, it feels like that when clarity is there, alignment ensues, and then it's like, just people are off to the races.
It's amazing how much foundational work needs to be done, but sometimes it's not the fun work. And I think people, we focus on the tasks like, okay, I need to get a website, or I need to do this, or I need to get on social media. But we never stop to say, what do I want my life to look like? When I wake up in the morning every day, what do I want to do? Do I want to drive into a practice? Do I want to spend time with my loved ones first and maybe work in the evenings? Do I want to work on a computer? Do I want to have relationships with people, or do I not want to talk to people? and
Yeah.
and it sounds like that's what you walk people through to help them figure out before they
Mm-hmm.
jump in and start this whole business. I've seen so many people, because I've been following this for so long, where they start a business and then I look at them a year later and I see that they're starting a different business. And then
Yep.
2 years later, they're starting a different business because they never took that time to stop and
Yep.
figure out what's going to make them happy. So it sounds like that's what you help them out with.
Yeah. And I have a segment of clients who come to me who, in that very same scenario, they've started into private practice. And then they find that, again, despite being in their own practice, right, they're entrepreneurial, they're doing work that, they felt like they loved, and they're into the same patterns and the same overwhelm that they thought and that they felt when they were, employed at someone else's practice, right? Because, and I think it goes back to that piece of really coming back to, what are the limiting beliefs that we have? What are the, what's the foundation? If we can create this vision and we can create kind of how we want to feel, whether it's, like you said, being around for our priority people, or it is, being present for the moments that matter most to us. If we can build, and we can, something around that, despite what society says and what many practices would say. I mean, there are opportunities to build that. And we can do that, and we can do it in a way that honors who we are, the work that we want to do, the number of hours that we want to work. And it does it in a way that where we then don't get into this burnout, like cycle, this like, try something new, figure it out. It didn't work. I feel really burned out. I'm totally overwhelmed. Let me try something different, right? Like this is very much, I agree, foundational work, and not often like the super exciting part of it. And it is the foundation of it.
Yeah, I know. I look back at my podcast episodes and I'll look at the titles of different ones, and anything that is like mindset related, they don't do as well because people don't want to do the mindset
Yeah.
work. But it's so important, because if you don't do that work, everything else you're doing, you're building it on a sandy foundation. And, you might hit a jackpot, you might be one of the lucky ones, but chances are, if you don't have that figured out, it's going to come back to haunt you. I'm just right now, I'm reading The Big Leap, and a lot of the words that you're saying, I just read them recently. So I would recommend anybody who this is like, how do I figure out what they call it the zone of genius versus the zone of excellence.
Yes.
And so just to give our listeners a little bit of a background, a zone of excellence means you're really good at it. You are an excellent nurse practitioner, or you are an excellent nurse, and you can rock at it and you can make really good money at it, but it doesn't fulfill you, or it doesn't fulfill you in the way that you can be fulfilled. And so, do you remember the author? Is it Gay Hendricks?
Gay Hendricks. Yeah, I just read that actually a couple of weeks ago. It was recommended to me. It's been in my, like, one of those, I've heard from a couple of people I should read. And finally I sat down and I read it over a weekend. I mean, it's a relatively quick read.
Yeah.
It's a total quick read. And I agree. And sometimes I see that, whether it's because of the profession or because of many of us who are women, we get into roles that where we excel, and we become very good at them and proficient. And then we find that maybe that's not all that there is. And, just because I'm good at it doesn't mean I have to do it all the time, right? Like, I'm really good at Excel spreadsheets. Do I like doing them? No, that's my zone of excellence, right? So, and it's even interesting. I mean, even to just from a more realistic standpoint, I still see some of those old patterns come up that I used to, in clinical practice. That was my zone of excellence. I was very good at that. Clinical practice, connecting with patients, that portion of midwifery, catching babies, good at that. This is very clearly, though, this is my zone of genius, which is really supporting women in a way that we're, with transformation and with opportunity and with mindset. And so I love it. But that is such a good book. I recommend it to anybody and everybody. I think it's a wonderful, quick read, and it's so powerful, so much, in there.
Yeah. It's funny because it was recommended to me probably about 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And I read it and I got so far in and then I just didn't understand it. And it's funny because I talk about the same thing with Rich Dad Poor Dad. I got to a point where I didn't understand it. And then now there's a saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I reread it again and I'm like, now I get it. I wasn't ready at the time to hear it. And now I understand it. So sometimes I think timing can be everything. And for our younger nurses that are out there or people listening, don't expect to get this in your 20s. You have to kind of try a lot of different things to know what is, where is my zone of excellence even at, let alone my zone of genius. And so this is I hear from, 20 somethings that are so stressed out because it's like, I don't know if I want to do this forever and I don't know what I want to do. And
Yeah.
I'm like, just enjoy it. Just enjoy what you're doing now. Figure out if you like it or don't like it. And if you don't like it, you learn just as much from what you don't like as from what you do like.
Yeah, and let it be the foundation of beginning to, if you can take an objective look and step back and say, if I had to look critically at what a nurse does and the roles in which the portions of my role that I really love and that really feed me, and the portions of my role that I can't stand and that I would happily never do again if I didn't have to. When you can start to look at it objectively and say, these are the things I pull apart, well, in this role, I really liked that I was, patient facing. In this role, I got to do some quality improvement work. Okay, so if we can take that, then it gives us a little bit more of saying, okay, well, how can I move forward? Well, maybe clinical practice isn't the best route for me, right? Maybe it's more of a nurse educator role. There are so many roles beyond bedside nursing that we can do, and where we create so much value for our patients, for our families, for our communities. And I've said it before, I say it again, sky is the limit here. And I think sometimes we get stuck in this trap, and whether it's guilt about, having student loan debt, or it's shame around, well, if I leave the profession and I haven't had a 25-year career, it's good for nothing. It's all for naught, which is, which is fixed mindset and not true at all. So, there's so many opportunities, but that first lens is really, can you develop a self-awareness? Can you look objectively at where you've been, what you've loved, what you've not loved? And then start to ask yourself, well, why? And then if you can't find, any of those themes or patterns, this is where somebody else, another objective person like a coach or a mentor, can be so helpful. I mean, goodness, I look back at my career and I'm like, man, I could have used a really good coach when I was when I was a new midwife, just,
Yes.
to have somebody there, to bounce ideas off and to be a sounding board, and to provide that safe space of no judgment, and just like, yeah,
Yeah. And, not everybody can do that. I think it takes a special person, because you are a coach, because you have the ability to look at people and see and ask questions that maybe they're not asking themselves, and dig in there and get that. Why did you like this? Well, I like being a nurse. Why do you like being a nurse? Well, I like to help people. What do you like to help? Yeah. So you can kind of dig in there and really get to it. Or even people saying, I don't like it anymore, but I did it one time. So there's so much. And I am a big proponent of coaching, because I have seen how it has skyrocketed both my career and my business, because you do get stuck when you're inside. There's a saying, you can't read the label from the inside. And and I always think about that when I get to a point where I'm like really stuck, or when you talk to somebody else and it's so obvious, but they can't see it because they're in the middle of it. They're in that messy middle and they can't see it. So I think that I'm, like I said, a very big proponent of coaching. I have another question that I want to make sure I ask. What made you start your business? What made you decide that this is something that you wanted to do?
A handful of things, but really probably two main ones. I had a event at work, which was a shoulder dystocia on a patient, with this patient, and all ended up being fine. We had a healthy mom and a healthy baby, which is good, and it really shook me to my core. And it was one of those moments where I wondered, is this the work that I want to be doing, from here on out? And then the second piece of it was that when I went back to school towards, I don't even remember what year it was when I started my MBA, but I at some point after the shoulder dystocia started to think, I want to do something different. I just don't know what it is, right? And I didn't have a coach, and I didn't have the wherewithal to even ask somebody for assistance in that way. And so I said, I'm going to go be in management. I'm going to go get an MBA because that sounds like a great idea. And then I got in and I thought, oh, management is not for me. I love people. I love people. I don't like to manage them. I know that very clearly now. And again, it's one of those experiences where you're like, oh, that's something I don't like. And that's good to know. Good to know. I'll just tuck that away. And so when I went back to school and did my MBA, we were also in the midst of, I was a medical director, and we were in the midst of building a large ambulatory facility here in Cleveland. And my, I had two young boys. My boys now are 7 and 10. And back then they were, I don't know, 3 and, 6 or 8. And, they were little. I was trying to serve as medical director. I was going to school to get my MBA. We were building this clinic, this large, multidisciplinary center, which was so phenomenal. And everything, I'd roll in at home at night and just feel like, gosh, I'm like rolling in on fumes, and I'm taking it out on people who are really important to me. And that was a big eye opener when I started to understand that that wasn't the way in which I really wanted to conduct myself. It didn't feel like I was coming like with integrity and serving, being the woman that I wanted to be, the mom that I wanted to be, the midwife, and I don't know about you, Dan, but the elusive balance, trying to find balance between all that stuff. I found it very challenging, and I don't know where it is. I still quite haven't. I'm still working on creating some of that harmony. I like to call it harmony now, and not balance. And so I just got to a point where I realized it's time for a change, and I made a change and said I'm ready to leave clinical practice, and I didn't know about even entrepreneurship until I was sitting in this course called Living the Good Life, and I was like, oh, there's this thing where you could build a business and you can make your own, and continuous improvement is people value that. Yes, I want that. And so, those kind of a handful of, issues all at once. And then I just said, I'm going to open a coaching business. I got my coaching certification, and then I went to town, and I, haven't looked back since.
Oh, I love that story. And I love what you say about didn't even know it was out there. That's one of the reasons I do this podcast, is to inspire and equip. So the inspiring part is letting people know all these different things that are out there. Like if you're feeling stuck and you don't even know, like, what do I want to do? Everything that it sounds like, yeah, well, maybe, but not really. Maybe you need to get a coach to help you get unstuck. And that's why I really love finding nurses that have done that, have gotten unstuck, and have found what they love and can inspire the rest to do the same, because it's not for everybody. Everybody should not be a coach. Everybody should not be an entrepreneur. Everybody should not be a midwife. Everybody should not be a nurse practitioner, but we should be doing what is right for us and figuring that out. So this is my, I listened to a podcast one day and said, oh, that's it. I didn't know you could do that. And it sounds like you went to this session and it was the same thing. So this is our goal, is with these podcasts, is just to put all these different ideas out there. And then when one resonates with you, you need to grab onto it and you need to dig in. So what does digging in with you look like? What is your coaching? There's a lot of different ways to do coaching. What does coaching with you look like?
So we meet, I have a 12-week process. In essence, we meet once a week by Zoom or by phone, depending on, the client's preference. And we have a consistent time. And then I have a big workbook that I've created that's got many assessments and tools in it. And I pick and choose what seems to be appropriate at that time for the client. It's all customized. And we go through the process of, talking through a lot of those, what do I really want? Like really talking through what do I want? What does a week look like for me? Where are the moments of the day where I find joy? What are the things that light me up and make me feel really good? And where I could, be working on that for a couple of hours and say, oh God, like, where's the time gone? Right? Those are those gems of moments. And so I support them through a process and give them, skills and tools, right, to examine some limiting beliefs, to talk about mindset, to look at what's important, to prioritize, and then to get pretty fierce about saying, all right, I'm putting a stake in the ground, and this is what I want. And it's amazing. It's unbelievable to me how the universe responds to us in that way. That when we have that clarity, and when we say, this is what I want, and this is what I desire to create in my life, and we say it, and how powerful it is, and then it unfolds. I mean, it's just, I love it. I love watching that process. So, so that's the main, kind of bulk of it. But we do a lot of work. The other part of the backbone of some of the coaching that I do is the Clifton Strengths Finder, which I feel has been so instrumental in understanding more about myself. And so I incorporate that as well into our coaching, and gives us a different lens, I think, of what we bring to the table. And again, Clifton Strengths talks about what's your strength DNA, what makes you stand out in a crowd. And so I use that as a tool to just, peel away a little bit more, like, well, when push comes to shove, like, what do you love? What are you really good at? Right? I don't focus on building weaknesses and strengthening weaknesses. That's not my my MO. I much prefer to see that, you look at the top 3 things that make you stand out in terms of your strengths, and then you go to town on them, like knock it out of the park.
Awesome. I noticed in your bio that you had retreats also. And I know right now, or if at the time of this recording, we are going through a pandemic, but podcasts last forever. And people will be listening to this 2 and 3 years from now. And hopefully by that time, we will be back to live events. So could you tell us a little bit about what one of your retreats would look like? What do you do on your retreats? They sound a lot of fun.
They're so much fun. I love them. I mean, it's one of those parts of the business that I just love. I like the process of putting together an event, and I really, really love creating an experience for people. And so the last retreat I did, the first one and the only one that I've done since launching my business and prior to the pandemic, was about a year ago. And it was called the Cultivate Retreat, 24-hour pause to get away, to have some time to do some of this exploration. I brought in a handful of speakers. I love to support other women entrepreneurs who are also local. I brought in a handful of speakers who I thought were phenomenal. And we had about 25 women, and we had speakers come in. We had some talk about, we had one talk about functional nutrition, and another talk about financial health, and another talk about habit science and how to use habits to your benefit. And it was so good. And then we had that first day of really kind of looking at getting some of those tips. And then on day 2, having a nice evening, having a beautiful dinner, having a fire pit and wine, surrounded by women and community with women who get it and who also crave that pause. And then that next day, really moving into, okay, what does it look like? Like if I, again, put a stake in the ground, if I say what I want, what does that look like? And having kind of an action session and a planning session around that. It was so much fun. I usually try to get, continuing education credit for my nurses, because I think I love, when they can also do this work that I think fuels us, and it restores us, and they can also, double dip and get some continuing education for it, and hopefully get their employers to pay for it. So I love that portion. But the retreats they're just super fun. There's something that cannot be, you just cannot replicate that type of energy in a virtual setting, in my humble opinion. And so I look forward so much to the day, when we do another one. I'm actually looking right now at the calendar to see whether or not we can pull something off for the summer that is outdoors and maybe with some separate cabins, and I don't know. So
It sounds like
looking at that
fun.
now.
Yeah. So if you're listening in the summer, you'll need to check out the website and find out if she's doing that. Yeah.
Yes.
I can't,
Yes.
I have to agree with you about retreats. There's something about, well, two things. There's something about getting away from your normal environment and putting yourself in a new environment. And it does so many different things. It helps you to stop and get out of your normal routines. It helps your creativity to be in a different environment where things are going differently. And it's to the point where on a quite regular basis, we actually laugh about it because we live on a beautiful bay on the Caribbean Sea. It is absolutely beautiful. And we will go on a weekend retreat to a all inclusive near us that has not as anywhere near as beautiful of a view, but I need to do that to get away from, even though I work from
Yeah.
home. And I know a lot of people wouldn't understand it, but it's like when I need to really get some clarity, I need to get away
Yeah.
from everything that's normal. And we laugh because we're like, we're paying money to go somewhere not as nice as where we live. I mean, believe me, the all-inclusive resorts are absolutely beautiful, but we have a pool, we have, the bay right there where there's no reason
Yeah.
for people come here for vacation. There's no reason for us to go, but I have to get out of my home space so that I can
Yeah.
do that.
And you're right. And there is a reason. I mean, it is, and even that simple idea that, to be cared for, not to have to cook dinner, not to have to put together breakfast, not to be somebody something for just, even if it's 24 hours, I think is something that so many of us crave. I know personally, after this pandemic, I'm craving, some time to be cared for, right? In the way that I've cared
Absolutely.
for others in my
Yes.
family. And so, that is part of that experience. When people come to my events, I want them to walk in and to be greeted with warm tea and a nice spread of, like, pastries and health bars and nuts and stuff. And then I want, to give them a little education. And then I want to pause and have a little bit more tea. And maybe I've got vendors who are coming in with some beautiful products and soaps. And I just want, and then I want them to move and say, okay, now you go back to your room, lay down for a little if you'd like. Dinner's going to be in about an hour, and just waltz right. I love when that experience is gifted to me, and I love to prepare it and produce it for others, because there's just something beautiful about allowing yourself to be cared for in that way. I love that. I love that, if I can do that for others, I'm like, oh, this is so good. Right.
I
And
wish
then
the listeners could
I,
see you right now because you're so excited and the passion is coming out. I can
I,
tell this is like what you absolutely love doing more than anything else.
I love it. I love it. Interestingly, Donna Cardillo, so she is the inspiration nurse. I met her through National Nurses and Businesses Association. And I think it's so interesting, her business model. And I was like, I'm going to be like Donna one day, because Donna plans retreats and she goes and hosts these women, right? And nurses and creates a sacred space for them and like puts on this experience. And then she takes time for herself after, right? Like she goes to places where she wants to travel. And I thought, oh, that is the ticket for me down the road at some
And it
point.
is needed because we've done a case managers cruise several times, twice. Third one was canceled due to COVID. But after the first one, I realized that after the cruise, we spent a week and just didn't do it. We needed a week for ourselves, because when you're giving and giving and giving, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I need to refresh. I need to get myself back so that I can go on again. Yeah, I love that. And I love how excited that you are. And the other thing is being around a bunch of like-minded people, because, when you're on the floor and you're starting to think these thoughts, everybody wants you to be just like them. We come to work every day, we put in our 12 hours, we go home, we take care of our kids, we go home. And when you start to think about, maybe there's something else out there different from me, and everybody else is looking at you like you have three heads. When you can actually be with people that think like you do, like, yes, there is something better out there, and we're going to find it, and we're going to find something that we love. We don't have to just grind every day. This isn't what life is supposed to be about. And you can be around other people like that. It does something to you where you're like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy for wanting these. And you skyrocket, because you are fed and you are nourished with that. Yes, this is real. This is something that I can do. I'm not crazy for wanting this. So there's something to be said on both parts, alone retreats and retreats or conferences or something where you can see other people like you, like National Nurses in Business. It's nice to go and see all these nurses. When you see a conference room full of nurses that are all have a business, you're like, wow, I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I mean, to feel like you're a zebra. I said that to Michelle Lesney. I was like, it's sometimes it's so when you feel like you're the only one, and then people have all sorts of feedback on everything that we do. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but they share it all the time. Oh, you shouldn't do that, or well, you shouldn't want to do that. No, you work too hard, you shouldn't throw away your career.
Oh
Blah
yes.
blah blah. And right, I've heard it, I know you've heard it. I mean, so many of us have heard it. And to be surrounded by people who say, do what you want, do what you love. Yes, continuous improvement and building a business is important, and it's necessary, and it's needed. And yes, you can have financial independence, and yes, you can create the schedule that you want. I mean, to be in that community is just like no other. And I completely agree with you. I'm so excited to get back to events like that just feed me in a way that it's just otherwise hard to get from without that's just that level of community and support that is so key to, when we do something and feel it, we feel like we're going against the grain.
Yeah, actually, I already recorded the podcast episode that'll come out after this one, and it's a solo podcast episode. And in it, I talk about that, about how getting away to conferences and stuff like that. For one thing, I didn't realize how much I missed it until we can't do it. And as an introvert, I thought that wasn't for me. And it's not, it is. It's like you can do it in a certain way that it can work for you. And I thought, well, that's not what introverted people do. I'd rather just sit at home and listen to a webinar. No, it is game changer. It really is. So I invite people to listen to next week. And I also want to invite people to reach out to you if Ann has spoken to you, if when you're listening to her, you're like, I want what she has. I want to learn more about this. Yes, that's me. I'm not happy where I'm at right now, and I don't know what direction to go to. And I want somebody to pull from me what will make me happy and make me light up and make me anxious to get out of bed every morning. Not anxious in a bad way, but anxious like I can't wait to get up and start my day. How can people find you?
Easiest way is to go to my website, which is www.annkonkoly.cnm.com. And come to the website. There's a handful of free resources for nurses, whether it's a couple of free CEUs through Ohio Nurses Association, or it's just information and YouTube videos designed for you. Come on by. You can always find me on social media. Handles the same, Ann Konkoly CNM, on Facebook and Instagram, and say hello, send a message, send a DM. I always love, and it's so funny. I agree with you. People will listen to this a couple years down the road. I'm just starting to get some of those messages like, I listened to you on this podcast, and I say, goodness, that was like 18 months ago, and they will say, it just really struck, me, and would you be willing to meet? And yes, I'd love to have a Zoom coffee, experience, until in fact, we're able to meet more easily in person, but, I'm happy to connect. And I love, that's a part of my business that I just love. So.
Awesome. Well, I'm really happy. And I know you're going to be getting some people connecting both now and in the future, which is what I love about podcasts. And all of this is in the show notes. So if you are driving or you're walking and you can't find, you didn't get a chance to write that down, just go to our website, thestayathomenurse.com, click on the podcast tab, and you will find Ann's podcast right there. And you'll find all the show notes written down for you. So we take the notes for you. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been such a pleasure talking with you. And any final words?
No, I just don't underestimate what can change in the course of, 6 months to a year, that there is something that is out there for you. And if you haven't quite found it, keep going, ask for help to get there, and don't underestimate what a year can do for us. So, but it was a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for hosting me and letting me share some parts of my story. And it was a real pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me on this week's episode. In addition to all of the places you can find Ann and me, I have also included a link to The Big Leap, the book we mentioned in the show. Until next week, adios from beautiful Puerto Aventuras, Mexico.